Welcome to Yury Experience, and today I want to talk about racism. In my previous video about ethnological field, I discussed different definitions that are very useful in my personal opinion in discussions when we are talking about different social topics which cover different ethnic groups or ethnic topics. Among these definitions were also a race and ethnic group, and these two definitions are one of the most important definitions for the topic of racism and for the topic how different ethnic groups and how different categories and groups of people interact with each other. I promised you a video about racism, and I do a video about racism. Yes, it is not the best topic to discuss, and yes, it can bring me in some trouble, but I don't think that my channel is so big to bring me a lot of trouble. But I think it is important to discuss stuff like that. It is maybe not important to see it in the world, but it is important to discuss it or to know what we are talking about. Why? Let's discuss it, let's talk about it, yeah. Obviously, first I have to tell you that this is Yury Experience and I'm Yury. Here I share my various experiences about different topics. I do 2 videos per week, Mondays and Thursdays. I personally enjoy both of my videos. If you will enjoy this video, please drop a like. You can also subscribe to the channel. Let's go. 2 small disclaimers, because the topic is very bad topic and a big topic, and it is a difficult topic to discuss and dangerous topic to discuss. Disclaimer number 1, racism is bad. Point. I will provide you a couple of opinions, a couple of various opinions about racism and what is racism and what is not racism. But if it is racism, what you see, what you experience, it is bad, we shall work against it, we shall fight against it as a community. And second point, which I kinda mentioned already, depending on the country, depending on geographical location, depending on the people, depending on the group of people you are currently talking with, definition of racism will be different, and what is racism and what is not racism will be different, which is why racism, although is a big word, is also very contextual word. And basically you kinda need to have a feeling for what is racism and what is not racism, at least for you, and do your best to define it for the world, because at the end of the day, that is what most people do. There is no common definition. When I tell you that there is no common definition, I don't mean that there is no definition. There is this definition, and in a moment I will share with you another one, but at the end of the day, there are a lot of definitions basically what racism is and what racism is not. And 2 most common, at least in my experience and in my opinion, is prejudice, or like some bad interactions or evil interactions towards some people based on their race or their ethnic group. And the second definition is each and every person can be put in a specific category, and basically race, and based on the appearance you can define that person's personal traits, like character traits, and based on that you can define some superiority and inferiority of different groups. That is also, so this belief that this exists is also racism. Depending on the definition, depending on the country, depending on the society, you will put ethnic group in the definition of the racism, or you will not put it in there. Actually, for ethnic group there's independent definition, I will cover that in a moment. But overall, if we just use this definition, then each and every belief, then one group of people, ethnic group or race, is better than another race. About each and every field of life, like doesn't matter what we are talking about, positive and negative, all of that is racism. A lot of people try to connect racism with xenophobia, that is this word, that is fear of unknown, especially unknown people, in this exact case, unknown cultures, unknown races if you want, unknown ethnic groups. A lot of people try to connect these topics. Actually, they are a little bit but different, because one is fear of, it can be a cause for racism, but it's not like the same stuff. But if you ask me, this xenophobia, or however you call it, is one of the main reasons for racism in a lot of cultures who don't experience other cultures. So for example, Russia, there are no black people, or like this amount of black people is really low. They don't really hate black people, they just don't know them, so they are something new for them, and that's basically xenophobia. Then when we add some stereotypes, which mainly actually come from Europe and USA, then you have this racism stuff. But first, it is more xenophobia, they don't know what they're talking about. Another important definition is ethnocentrism. It is when you try to understand a foreign culture, so not your culture, through the lens of your own culture instead of looking for the values of that culture. So basically you are coming in there and saying, my culture is better, because in most of occasions you say that your culture is superior to that culture. And basically ethnocentrism is racism when it is applied to ethnic groups. And that is why I personally don't like when racism is used for ethnic groups. In my personal opinion, it is a little bit misguiding. But I understand when people put it together, especially including the fact that not a lot of people know the word ethnocentrism. I personally again like the differentiation, like this word is hate for this group of people or these groups of people. This word is hate for these groups of people. Let's talk a little bit history. Although racism is nothing new to a lot of nations all over the world, the word itself appeared first in the beginning of the 20th century. Actually, it wasn't the word racism, it was this word which I completely forgot how to pronounce and what is the word. To be honest with you, I'm not completely sure why it appeared first then, but I think it has a lot to do with a lot of freedom movements, let's fight for rights and stuff like that. So that word appeared during that time. It had a lot in common with our current understanding of racism. It was basically almost the same stuff. Well, but what brought it on the completely other level is different scientific research that was during the beginning, actually the end of the 19th and beginning till the middle of the 20th century. There was a lot of research about what traits have different races. So you look at person and you can understand that person is smart, that person is cool, that person can carry responsibility, and that person is something else, that person is good in math, that person can maybe do some art stuff. So depending on the race, you could understand what traits that person has or what that person can be proficient in. That is called scientific racism. According to my knowledge, this word combination is not the best, it's a little bit misguiding, but there is no better word combination for that, at least at the moment. And close after the Second World War, because there was a lot of ethnic movements during the Second World War, it was declared by UN, if I'm not mistaken, that you shall not think about race as a physiological or biological concept. It is purely a social construct, a social idea that we created for ourselves and to which we try to connect some traits which are actually not there. So this whole idea of this race has better IQ than this race is just wrong, misguiding, and actually does nothing to do with reality. And also around that time were a lot of declarations in terms of let's not do bad stuff to people based on their race or ethnic group or religion or whatnot. Actually, you shall not make the life of a person worse in any way, in any definition, because of that person's race, that ethnic group, religion, sex, gender. Actually, gender was not included at that point. Anyway, you shall just do good for people, basically. But obviously it didn't work because we still have racism, and it's not really difficult to find. It doesn't matter whether you define racism as racism or racism as combination of racism and ethnocentrism, or if you add xenophobia or not, you can find and you will find racism all over the freaking world. Actually, especially in recent times, because maybe 200, 300 years ago there was no big movement of nations, of ethnic groups from place to place, which is why people didn't have the need to be racist towards other people. There was no other groups. There was like just basic, you have more money, you have less money. But now, since we have different ethnic groups, since we have different abilities, we have different opportunities, we can move from country to country pretty freely. Now more people have to interact with people from other cultures, and then when it comes to the point you are different than me, I don't like it. I will just say that you are a bad person because there is some strange stereotype about that. Yay. Speaking of that, that was individual racism. So one person does something bad or thinks bad about another person. But there is also the stuff that is called institutional racism, and it is something that happens on the bigger scale. It is basically how majority interacts with minority in a bad way. How big companies don't employ people from minorities or didn't employ people from minorities. Or how people in the government try to do their best to not invite people of different skin colors to their government. That's basically the big form of institutional racism. Obviously, in a lot of West European countries and in USA, in Canada, it is more difficult to find open racism. It is just not. It's not that easy to be an open racist anymore. Most of people hide it in some form. But there are countries where you can just go on the street and people will throw stones at you because you are from that ethnic group or you are from that race. And depending on the time, it can be even worse. So yeah, it's not the question or the problem of yesterday. It is problem of today, and it is problem of our future, if you ask me. Interestingly enough, when I prepared myself for today's video, I read that a lot of racism studies, so there are social studies about racism, a lot of them are about white racism. At least in the beginning it was more, nowadays it is more diverse, if we want to call it like that. But in the beginning it was more about white racism. And to be honest with you, it is understandable. Because of colonialism and because of imperialism, a lot of people who were in Europe and who were traditionally white people moved to other places and told them, we own you and now you pay us and you are worse than us in some regards, so that is why we are better than you. Obviously there were and are exceptions, and if you actually look into the topic you will find it. There were a couple of empires that don't really have anything to do with white people, but that were still pretty racist towards different ethnic groups or race groups. Also, there's a topic of reverse racism. It is when a minority group decides to be prejudiced, like be bad, be discriminatory towards the majority group. So for example, for again USA, it's a great example because USA is a very mixed country. So for USA it is when, for example, black people are racist towards white people. There are various opinions about whether you can call it racism or whether you cannot call it racism, and the latter ones normally say we are minority, we don't have power in order to be racist. So in order to be racist you need to have power, you need to be in majority, you need to have institutional power. But if you watched my video like until now and paid attention, you know that there are at least two different kinds of racism: individual and institutional. And yes, for institutional racism you need to have institutional power, because if you don't have institutional power, it is difficult to press on majority without having the power as a minority. But on the individual level, you definitely can be racist. Actually, in my personal opinion, reverse racism is just a wrong phrase. It is just racism, but other way around, like from minority to majority, or from a person from minority group to a person from majority group. Because I personally believe that interpersonal racism is nothing unique for one group of people. Like, that is not something that only white people do, or black people do, or East Asian people do. Everybody does it. which doesn't make it good, but it's still the case. And the last topic before grand finale is the idea of subconscious racism. There's an idea in sociology, which is more or less supported, that most of people are subconsciously racist because of their experience, because of their growing up, because where they lived, because of their geographical location, culture and whatnot. They have some subconscious ideas which influence their decisions in real life, independent of the fact whether they want to be influenced by them or they don't want to be influenced by them. So you can basically be the most open person in the world, the most tolerant person in the world, but you still can be subconsciously racist. And that is an idea which is kind of crazy, and I cannot completely stand behind it. But on the other hand, I understand that subconscious has great power over us. So our subconsciousness has a lot of influence on us and to what decisions do we make and what decisions we decide not to make. Which is why I don't want to go more into the topic, because I kinda have to agree, although I disagree. The main thing, the most important stuff that I need to cover today. And it is actually my opinion, it is not a scientific fact, it is not something that you can prove or whatnot. In my personal opinion, each and every person is racist depending on the definition of racism. Each and every person has some opinions or some ideas which appear without them actually thinking actively about that. It is like, it is, again, I think it is subconscious for a lot of us. It is something we need to be careful around people which we don't know. Actually, it is a little bit xenophobia, which leads to racist behavior. But whether it is racist behavior or not depends on the situation, person, and all the other stuff. Which brings me to another main topic, or another main question, and it is, there are no clear borders. You can say the same phrase to two groups of people which just happen to be from different locations, and although they both come from the same race or same ethnic group, and their reaction will be different. One of them will call you racist, the another one will just laugh, for example, if it was a joke. And that brings me to the idea, you cannot be perfectly not racist. You are racist on some level, and I am racist. We all are probably racist on some level, to some degree. And what shall we do? Don't act upon it. Don't hate people. Do your best to just don't share this part of you with the world. You actually do hide a lot of parts of you probably from the world. Just don't show this one too. Don't hold accountability for your own opinions. Live with them and let them be. Let them just exist in your head, in your body, in your mind, but don't act upon them towards other people. The value of the person is, in my personal opinion, completely independent of that person's appearance. I actually am not a believer of the idea that all of us have same value. I don't believe in that, and my various experience showed me that a lot of people actually don't believe in that. Actually, they do so as if they believe, but they don't really believe. And I'm one of them. I don't believe that all people have same value. All people want and can do same stuff. We all are different, which makes the life kind of more interesting. But what doesn't define our value is our appearance. It defines a lot of stuff. Our appearance has a lot to do with a lot of social interactions that we have with the life. But as a person, as a human being, it is kind of independent of that. Actually, if we throw away the whole ethic point, then yes, it is completely independent of that. Which is why, if you don't act upon your racist ideas, as long as you like as much as you understand them. So if it is actually subconscious, which is actually, there is no clear proof of that. There are some studies, but there is no clear proof of that. As long as it is conscious, don't act upon that. Don't do it. Do your best to avoid it. I know it sounds a little bit as hiding stuff from others, but let's be honest, it is not as if you don't hide your bad sides from biggest part of humanity. Just hide it from everybody. I don't know. Try to learn not to be like that, but it's pretty much big stuff to ask of people. Like, try to learn not to be racist. What is how? Get the experience maybe. That helped me a lot towards a lot of different topics and also ethnic groups. So maybe get the experience. Maybe find your own way. But doesn't matter what we are talking about. There is no clear possibility to define a group of people and to understand traits of this group of people only based on their appearance. Yep. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have an opinion to share, please do it. I don't have like the end understanding, the end opinion about the topic, so you can share yours too. Also, if you enjoyed the video, please drop a like. You can also subscribe to the channel. I'll see you on Thursday. Have a great week.